Hello, hello. Welcome to Minds on Mushrooms. I'm your host, Maggie Kirkwood. Today with me, we have my rock star girlfriend, Sara Westman. This is an exciting episode for me because Sara, I really am so impressed. Most recently, you have written and put out a book, and we can get to that. But I guess I'd like to say this episode is kind of just dedicated to talking about you and your achievements and how proud I am of you and all of the growth that you have done and how inspirational you really have been to me.
Aw, thank you. Thank you.
So welcome. Thanks for taking time to come. You are coming from Naples, Florida, correct?
I am. I've been living in Naples, Florida for about 15 years or more.
Wow. So Sara and we met up at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, 20 some years ago, and have stayed in contact. And I thought, what a perfect opportunity for you to come on the show. From what I've kind of gathered, you've kind of been on this like growth, healing journey of sorts forever. Like, I think you're like the first person. I want you to kind of talk to me about, first of all, Sara, your kind of expertise is, she's an emotional intelligence speaker and coach.
Yes.
So let's just talk a little bit about your journey and kind of how you got to be there.
Okay. And by the way, it is Sara Mueller officially, but okay. Sara Westman from back in the day when we met each other. And so many of our friends from back then still call me Westman.
I know. As it was coming out of my mouth, I'm like, okay.
I love that. Yes. I love that.
Sara Mueller, let's go.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because I was looking at a book, the Tibetan book for living and dying, and I hadn't looked at it in many, many years. And actually, I had asked for that book in college. And so even in the midst of all of our college experiences and our party days and our exploration of life, I was always interested in something deeper. So there was a spiritual growthness within me even back then. And I studied psychology in college, and then moving through living in Brazil and New York City, and then my yoga teacher training, that really started to open my eyes to personal growth and really emotional intelligence. I didn't really know that it was emotional intelligence until many, many years later when I was studying leadership at Harvard University. And they kind of gave me this phrase, emotional intelligence, as to what I was going through and teaching and learning about in yoga teacher training. And
so, when was it that you completed your yoga teacher training?
That is a really good question. It was probably about 15 to 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I just always loved the practice of yoga. It was a huge tool for me to really come into my body. I feel like yoga allowed me to recognize that I wasn't really sure who I was, who Sara Westman, Sara Mueller really was, because in high school and in college and my whole life, I was trying to be who everyone else wanted me to be, or who I thought everyone else wanted me to be. And I was trying things on and trying to fit in. And I realized when I started practicing yoga and taking yoga workshops that I wasn't being very authentic. I wasn't really connecting to myself. And so that was part of the journey that I'm still on, but that I started to get closer in during my yoga practice, because it's a practice of getting in your body.
Okay.
And I was very separated from my body until then. And as I started getting more in my body, that allowed me to be more present and to start to recognize, what all this chatter was that was going on in my mind. And so I really started looking at that and pursuing it, and still am, working through all that stuff.
So you had kind of maybe a bit of an awakening through your yoga practice and certification. And then how was it that you kind of leaped into coaching? Did that come first? And then Sarah's done so many speaking engagements. I'd like to talk about some of the work that evolved from kind of, I guess, understanding yourself more.
Yeah, I think to set the foundation a little bit more, the yoga teacher training was more than just how to teach a physical asana, how to teach the physical practice of yoga. It was really about how to stand in front of a room with your heart open and just being who you were and being able to inspire others, which I so wanted to do. And so that began to open the door for me. And I loved yoga. And I had this big career, this career that was paying me a lot of money to travel both personally and professionally around the world. And I had a smile on my face. I had just married my college sweetheart, who you know. Yes. We were trying for a human baby. We had fur babies. We had just bought our first home. And so, on paper, everything in my life right after that yoga teacher training seemed really great. But the reality is that I was really burnt out. I was stressed out. I was a top performer at the company that I worked for, yet I was stressed out about work and my performance all the time. When it was time for me to go to bed at night, it was like I had just chugged a can of Red Bull and my mind was running sprints.
Yes.
And I was drinking a glass or a bottle of wine every night to try to numb the fact that I wasn't fulfilled, that I was stressed. I'd started to open that door of authenticity, but I wasn't fully walking through it.
Okay.
And I thought it was this big corporate job. I thought it was this, I was building these executive training programs for Fortune Global 500 executives. And I thought because this job is so demanding and so stressful and so big, that it was to blame for this burnout that I was feeling. And so I quit that job and I went to go teach yoga full time, thinking that a more peaceful type career would be the answer. And what I found was that I ended up being just as stressed out as ever.
Yeah.
And really the only thing that changed was my paycheck was now a lot smaller as a yoga teacher.
Yes.
But it was, the journey for me beyond the door kind of opening that we talked about was really life knocked me to my knees. So during that time period, I also hit a rock bottom in my marriage with my husband. And, I wanted to point my finger at him and I wanted to blame him. And I had sort of a mindful moment where I recognized that I was the common denominator in all of these things that weren't working in my life. And instead of, pointing the finger out at him, I pointed the finger at myself and I chose to take radical responsibility, which is really a tenet of how I live my life and what I ask of my clients, whether I'm working with leadership teams or with executive client coaching clients. I took radical responsibility and realized that if anything in my life was to change, I had to change.
Wow.
And so that was where I really went into a deeper growth journey and really got deeper into emotional intelligence. I worked with business coaches, mindset coaches, therapists, mindfulness teachers, and started to peel back the layers of my false self, peel back all those things that were holding me back from standing in my power and loving life and operating from my authenticity.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, it is pretty surreal because I feel like you are just so knowledgeable about all of this and have been for it's quite a long time. And I just feel, I think it was about a year ago, our girls' trip vacation, you said emotional or EQ. And I was like, what is that? I'm just starting, I guess I've started my journey, but learning more about, recently I've been talking a lot more about human design and all of these components that kind of like come together and help us. For me, psychedelics have helped me self-discover and self-love, essentially. So I love all the different facets. And let's talk about EQ or emotional intelligence just for a little bit, if you don't mind. Did you say there's 4 pillars?
There are, yes. And I love that you said self-discover. So my business name is Joy Discovered.
Oh, that's right.
And I just, joy is something that evokes wellness, evokes a sense of happiness for our thriving, our success, you know, and that's of course what I want to create for myself and what I want for you and for everyone, really for all of us to have more joy, both at work and at home.
That is so funny because I helped you with some of that branding.
You
and
did.
Now that
you created
it's
my very first logo, and it switched a little bit, as we all evolve.
At least the name is making more sense for me now, as I am still discovering.
Yes, right. And it's an ongoing process, our evolution. And, if we look at emotional intelligence is often used within the leadership space because it's a tool that has been shown after decades and decades of research from Harvard and Yale and Learning in Action that it helps people to be better leaders more than IQ, smarts, and even having the technical expertise of your job, because really emotional intelligence is about being able to understand and manage ourselves so that we can understand and relate with others. And so if you're a leader, you're relating with and managing other people. If you're a parent, you're relating with and managing the relationship with your children. We're human beings with human beings. So we all need to have those tenets of emotional intelligence. But do you want me to kind of walk through the four basics of the four pillars?
That. Yeah, just
okay.
I'd love to hear.
Cool. So the first pillar is self-awareness. And the pillars of EQ are linear, meaning we really have to start at pillar 1 and get really great at that in order to keep moving up the ladder, so to speak, of emotional intelligence. And so self-awareness is really about understanding us, discovering who we are. Like you said, that self-discovery, it's looking at our patterns in the way that we communicate, in the way that we think. It's looking at our strengths and our weaknesses and our values. And it is about understanding how we're perceived by others. 'Cause I work with a lot of leaders and they think they're coming across a certain way, but when I talk to their team that reports to them, they're showing different examples to me. So self-awareness is about having that accurate self-perception and also having a large emotional vocabulary so that we can process our emotions rather than letting our emotions hijack our behavior so that it comes out sideways.
So quick question, are there, I guess, sort of assessments that you're having teams do, or how are you gauging how self-aware one is?
Yeah, so there are different emotional intelligence assessments that you can rate yourself.
Got you.
The most effective way would be to have other people rate you as well, so that we can look for that, what I call the delusion gap, that gap between how I think I'm showing up versus how other people think I'm showing up. And so when I was studying leadership at Harvard, they had me do what they call the 360. So I sent that assessment to other people that I worked with, my husband, my family, so that I could get a better understanding as to how they saw me. Because self-awareness is, yes, understanding ourselves, but we often need other people to be that mirror for us. Or we might need something like plant medicine or any of these other modalities to be that mirror for us so that we can start to see where we are holding ourselves back, where we aren't serving ourselves, and understanding that we all operate from really patterns, emotional and communication patterns that were really given to us before the age of 7.
Okay, so pillar 1, self-awareness, and then moving up the line.
Moving up the line, the next one is self-management. And so it is about creating balance and resilience and high performance productivity in your life. So it's very simple, but it's not simple to do. So a lot of what self-management is are things like getting a good night's sleep and exercising and taking care of your mental and your physical and your emotional and your spiritual health. And learning how to relax and practicing mindfulness. It's all those things that we know we should do. Yet they're often the first things that we drop when life gets lifey, as my husband often says. And so it's remembering that we want to actually do those things that support us. And instead of giving into instant gratification, it's let me take actions in the present moment that are aligned with my aspirational self, my higher self. So I love the show Yellowstone. And an example of self-management is whenever they release the new episodes of Yellowstone, all I want to do is sit and binge watch every single episode of Yellowstone. But if I did that and stayed up all night long, then I wouldn't have the energy and the awakeness to come here this morning and talk with you as my best self. And so an example of self-management would be to say, okay, I'm going to watch 1 or 2 episodes and then I will catch up on the rest on the weekend so I can get a good night's sleep. So it's really about doing those things that allow us to be consistent in our life and to take care of ourselves.
And it seems like a lot of those minor things can really add up, just knocking off or getting one more hour of better sleep rather than watching, I'm guilty of the same thing with television.
Yeah, well, we have to make the hard choice in the moment, because it's easier to keep eating the chocolate cake, or it's easier to keep binge watching the show, or to keep drinking the wine.
Yes.
But instead, self-management would be the saying, if we're looking at even in this healing conversation, it's saying, okay, I know that self-awareness is showing me that these patterns are showing up in my life, that there's something that feels stuck. And so self-management is saying, well, I'm going to take the step now to dive into it, whether it's through plant medicine or therapy or journaling or whatever it is, so that I can deal with it and then continue moving on.
Got you. And then I'm going to ask a quick question here too. Do you get into anything when you're talking about self-management, I guess completing a task or taking the option that's healthier for you, the better version for you? So not drinking that second glass of wine or turning the TV off. Is there anything? I'm learning more and more about ADHD, and would that provide like a dopamine hit to you? Like kind of like, I'm taking that extra step of self-management for me. Do you get into the studies of that? I'm learning a lot about dopamine and as it relates to ADHD. So
So I'm not an expert on that, but what I would say is related to it is that we need to create a new rewards that honor our longer term goals.
Right.
And so whether that is, I'm going to just sit and meditate for 5 minutes. And if I do that at the end of the week, I'm going to give myself a little gift or, so it's, or just really celebrating those wins so that you're getting that dopamine or that feel good for the thing that's harder to do in the moment.
Yes.
And then we get the reward later.
Okay.
So yes.
Reward.
Yes. We all do well with rewards.
Okay. So,
especially when life is meant to be about joy.
Right. Yes. I mean, come on. Really. Okay. Moving on. So third pillar.
Yes. So once we understand and manage ourselves, then we are moving into the third pillar, which is others awareness.
Okay.
And this is really all about having empathy, being able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes so that we can understand what their concerns are, what their desires are. If you're a leader, what motivates them so that you can really draw out their greatness at work versus, having to shame or fear them into doing their job, And so we have to really understand ourselves, because the more that we understand ourselves, the more we're able to understand what might be making someone else tick or why they might be showing up the way that they're showing up.
Yes.
And so others awareness is about, like I said, empathy and listening and validating others' experiences, recognizing that there's always two truths to any story. So like you and I are in this conversation right now together. We're both experiencing it. Other listeners are going to be listening to it, but there's going to be an absolutely different truth for every single one of us because we're all different humans.
Sure.
We all have, whether or not we had breakfast this morning or had a good night's sleep or what our life experiences have given to us impacts who we are and how we show up. So that pillar is about understanding others. And then we move into the fourth pillar of EQ, which is called relationship management.
Okay.
And this is really what emotional intelligence is. This is, being able to relate with others and have strong relationships at home, at work, with our children. It's really about embodying courage, because a lot of what these, even though they're called soft skills, it really requires someone to be strong and have courage and have those hard conversations, address things. If you're a leader, it's about holding someone accountable to standards of excellence, even if you want everyone to like you. Like if we have a people-pleasing tendency, which all of us do to some extent because we're a social tribe species.
Yes.
And so it's just really kind of tying that all together and pulling the greatness out of others and managing those relationships that you have.
Wow. I see.
So much.
So yeah, I mean, how cool. So you get hired to speak about this. It mainly in corporate settings, would you say, or is it team building or tell us more
so
about
most of the organizations that I work with I'm working with their leadership teams or their senior leadership teams.
Okay, wow.
And so it's 10 to 15 to 20 of the senior leaders, and we're going through a half or a full day workshop, or sometimes I'm working with them every quarter to dive deeper into communication skills and soft skills and emotional intelligence, which it all encompasses. And I do speak to larger audiences as well, more on a keynote style where we're more kind of going over the basics of EQ.
Okay. So I think for our listeners, for me, and one of the common things that I'm constantly talking about is, yes, I think with plant medicine, I mean, initially I was able to help all of, I guess, my alcohol abuse, right? And at that point, I knew nothing as far as the medicine could help me self-explore, self-discover. I mean, these were just, I guess, at the very beginning of my journey was unaware even of its help toward addiction and things like that. So yeah, I'd love to kind of like change gears and talk about kind of how emotional intelligence, it seems like some of these self-discoveries are a lot of what you're speaking about with emotional intelligence. And I don't want to say, oh, I'm so emotionally, my EQ is off the charts, but can you talk about maybe if you've had a microdosing experience or anything that you see relatable and kind of how people are evolving in the two realms? I don't even know if that's too out there, but that's my question.
Yes. So I think the way that I want to answer that is, I think back to my college days, my high school and college days. And, I, at that point in my life, was trying to fit in. I was trying to figure out who I was. And I spoke a little bit about that earlier. And at that time period, I was really trying as many drugs and alcohol as I could because I don't know, I was searching for something, I think, even back then. And it was a way for me to feel like I belonged. As soon as I had a certain drug in my pocket, I was belonging to that group of the party friends, And so I experimented with, many different psychedelics back then. And while those weren't sacred, I wasn't trying to heal. There wasn't intention behind it besides to get totally messed up, right? So it was a completely different experience as to how I would look at it in the way that I live today. But I do believe that something about those experiences did open my mind and my heart a bit. I feel like one of the biggest lessons or wisdom that I've been able to integrate from the drugs that I did, and I was really into meth. Actually, that was my drug of choice in the end of high school. It was just very common in the small town that I grew up in. And, I could blame myself and feel bad about myself and feel shame about doing the meth and things that I did when I was on meth or wanted meth. And I've had to work through healing a lot of that. But I was able to take away wisdom from it in the fact that when I was doing meth with others, it wasn't a certain gender or a certain religion or a person that lived on this side of the street versus this side of the street. It wasn't people from parents who were together or who were divorced. Really, it was a human experience, and I think that really opened me to recognize that all of us humans have the same fears. We want to belong. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want love. And it helped me just to see that it doesn't matter what we go through. We all make mistakes. We all fuck up from times to time. And it's really helped me to be a very compassionate, like really fiercely compassionate with my clients, whether it's a leadership team or my executive coaching clients. Because I've done a lot of really stupid things and like I'm embodying them and I've learned from them. And so to tie this back into your question, there's so many ways that we can heal and use tools and modalities to integrate those aspects of our past. And rather than feel shame about them or rather pretend that they're not there, it's okay. This was a part of me that was doing the best she could with what she had. The girl, the young, insecure girl that was trying to fit in, like I have a space in my heart for her now because I understand that she was trying to be loved. And we can integrate that through healing modalities, whatever it might be. And so I think that's where the tie-in with psychedelics is. And, I've gone through a sort of another level of spiritual awakening and growth and personal development really this last year. And I'm still in the middle of it and trying to figure it all out. And I think that us as humans, we're always evolving, but that has led me to want to experience a psychedelic retreat because I haven't done psychedelics besides microdosing. Recent, in my adult life.
I kind of want to talk about that a little. So you said you have maybe a retreat in mind, and what sort of ceremony would you be sitting with there?
So the one that I've been kind of sitting with this openness to some sort of psychedelic experience retreat over the last couple of years. And this one that finally came up, I could just tell that it was felt right for me. And the way that it's set up is the first day is MDMA. And then the next day you're doing psilocybin, next day psilocybin, then bufo, and then there's a hape ceremony as you leave. And it's with, you know, I've studied shamanic Reiki. I have a mentor that is just really deep into the shamanic lineages and studies in Peru with the actual shamans. And so I really wanted to be with just people who took the medicine very seriously and have dedicated their life to it. And I felt that connection when I heard about this retreat that came across me.
Sounds incredible, and pretty full spectrum of the plant medicine offerings there. I mean, I think, I can't wait to hear all about it. I just wanted to kind of go back. I think just something that I'm realizing, at least as it pertains to my journey, is with psilocybin, I think it does allow you to see some of your truths, or to envision, not necessarily relive the traumas, but just kind of be able to sit with it. But it provides like this gentle hug, a gentle way for, I guess, to process and heal. And so I'm just kind of like, it's all interwoven. I'm just talking, but it's just surprising because it is ever or evolving still for me as I'm starting to understand how a lot of these things relate. And I think that the use of plant medicine for someone that hasn't, that retreat is probably going to be so profound for you.
Yeah. And I think, I microdosed about a year ago, and that really kind of opened my eyes to some things that kicked off this next level of evolution that I'm going through. And I sort of saw a truth that I couldn't unsee.
Okay.
And that was also near the time that I published my book. And
oh my gosh,
that was just really a door opening. And that was a vulnerability and an exposing and an authenticity of myself. And so it's like all of these things are pointing to me and saying, okay, so really step into your authenticity even more. What is not in line with your highest purpose? What is not aligned with your soul's purpose? What is not aligned to you? And so that microdosing kind of was one of those pieces that opened it. And then also I wanted to circle back to what you said about that, plant medicine being that safe container, because we were talking about emotional intelligence. And in that first pillar, it's really about things happen to us, whether it's little T trauma or big T trauma in our earlier life and even in our adult lives. And what's most common for us to do as humans, because emotions can be uncomfortable, is we shove them down. Correct. We suppress them, we numb them out, we even repress them. And so when we're doing that, it's what I do when I'm sharing this in my leadership trainings or a keynote is it's like a beach ball. Let's say your emotion is a beach ball and someone throws you a beach ball and you're like, well, I don't want to deal with this beach ball right now.
Yeah.
So you shove the beach ball down underneath the water of a swimming pool.
Sure.
Well, what happens eventually? Like the ball goes out sideways, right? Yes. And it flies out, and that can look like coming out, us as yelling at one of our coworkers, or it could also look like coming out 10 years later in the form of an illness. I've been reading and listening to a lot more work around the fact that emotional suppression is leading to a lot more cancers and diabetes and Alzheimer's and autoimmune disease. Because
Gabor Mate.
Yep. I'm in the middle of his book, When the Body Says No. And then there's the other book, When the Body Keeps the Score. Right. So when we're suppressing these emotions, and I just am hearing that so many more people that are getting sick younger, and we need to be able to let that out. Yeah. And if we aren't able to do it in therapy, or we can only get to a certain level, or, I've tried as many modalities as have been given to me.
So true though. Yeah.
And so I love that all of our paths are different and unique, and that plant medicine can be something that can help
I think it really truly can
to let those emotions come out and be the wisdom that they are meant to be for us, the data that they're meant to be for us.
Right. There's been so many, I guess, catalyst type stories with plant medicine that kind of just, essentially was the big start, or the truth that was seen that can't go unnoticed, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, You say everything so beautifully, Sarah, and I want you to talk a little bit more. Let's talk about your book.
Okay.
So you released that in when that was this about
early 2023, 2024.
early
Yes, early this
2024.
year.
And yeah, let's talk about that whole process. Like when was the idea born that you were going to have a book?
Yeah. So I think, I didn't really explain kind of the transformation that I went through with emotional intelligence.
Okay,
And
let's hear
so,
about that.
after I went through that, I recognized that even though I was teaching yoga, a lot of my skills were aligned with that big corporate job that I thought was to blame for all of my stress. And so I actually went back to that job, but this time I had this new level of skill in emotional intelligence.
Okay.
And I was able to make more in profit share, have more fun at work, make better relationships with my colleagues and our clients and our vendors,
Wow.
and get more work done in less time, right? And at the same time, my husband went through his own journey of emotional intelligence, and we were able to come back together and heal our marriage. And after that time period, we gave birth to our first son, Maverick, and all children and babies are, and grandbabies and fur babies are all super special, but he was an extra special blessing to us because before we had done the work of EQ, we had tried to get pregnant several times, and all of those pregnancies had ended in miscarriage. So it was like the universe was saying, get your shit together before you bring another being into this world that you're responsible for.
Right.
So that is kind of the long-winded way of saying that's what led me to want to write the book, because that journey that I went through changed my life, both professionally and personally, and brought me to all of the beautiful blessings that I have in my life today. And so I always called myself an author, but never wrote a book. And it was just always kind of percolating in the back of my head. And then, I don't know, it was maybe 5 years ago or so that I started to sit down and write it. And I would go through periods where I was very consistent and not consistent because I was also building my business on the side. So I had a couple different baby projects and two children and all the things. So that was the one thing though that I knew that if I died and that book was not published, I feel like it would have been, I would regret my life. I would have missed out. So I just knew that I had to get it out there because I knew it would help other people.
Yes.
And it started to get to a point where I was like, I need to get this book out there. Like I feel like there's these things in us that are just ready to finally come out. And I wasn't ready. I kept going back and trying to rewrite it with my new level of wisdom. And I'm like, I'm going to be writing this book forever because we're always evolving, know? And so finally I said, this is just good enough the way it is. I can write book number 2 on what I'm going through now. And I found an amazing editor and worked with selfpublishing.com, and we were able to publish the book and just really lean into the support of my friends and family like you that really helped to get the book out there and get such great feedback and reviews. And it's been such a beautiful process, and I feel so good to have it out there finally.
So, and the title of the book is?
It's called The Balanced Life Blueprint.
The Balanced Life Blueprint.
Yes.
So it's really kind of like a creation or explaining kind of about how you can have it all, right?
Yeah. And I truly believe that because I feel like, and I think this is something that women probably struggle more with men, even though I know that men want to have it all as well. But there are so many women who didn't think they could have a big career and be an awesome parent, or have a big career and have a healthy body. We always are, and this or that, but I really think it's an and. We can have, as long as we're really clear on what having it all means. What does joy mean? Not what does society tell us that joy and success are, but what is aligned with me? What does true joy and success look like for me?
Right.
And so balance isn't about like time management and hiring a nanny or a housekeeper, and all those things are great. And yes, use them. It's really about balancing ourselves emotionally and mentally and even spiritually so that we can show up as the powerful person that each and every one of us are.
Sure. Wow. I just feel like sometimes some of these learnings could just be offered, we're talking about EQ. How about learning some of this in grade school? Or, I guess this kind of wanted to ask some questions. So I think I identify as an empath. Didn't really understand. So I used to be in the corporate space at Best Buy, and they had us take the Clifton Strength Finder.
I did that in my Harvard classes too.
And my number one strength is empathy.
Wow.
And then I started learning more about that and how sometimes it can, when you about self-management, it's kind of like making sure that you're taking care of your needs, and not overextending yourself. Or I guess where I'm going with this is like, sometimes I feel like I'm too aware of, I guess, other people's feelings, things like that, because what I've been learning about maybe being an empath. Do you feel that, I don't know how to ask what I'm asking, but like, let's say you're coming across or working with people who don't have much self-awareness at all. Is that common?
Yes.
First of all. Okay.
Yes. And generally what we find in the data is that most of us think that we're self-aware, yet only a small percentage of us actually are. So there's a company called Uric Group that did research on this and found that 85+% of us think we are self-aware, but when you talk to our coworkers or family, only 10 to 15% of us really would be.
Really?
So it really is just to say we all have the opportunity to open our mind. And especially like me working with leadership teams, leaders are very successful. They've gotten there because they've been producers, they've been successful. And so we often have confirmation bias and continue looking at the world with the same beliefs or knowing that we already have. And that means we're not going to grow. We're going to stay stagnant. And we need to continue thinking, okay, what's the new opportunity for growth for me? Where might I not be seeing the truth here? Who can give me feedback, which is harder as we get more senior in our careers? And how can I have other people be a mirror for me so that I can see where I need to keep growing?
I see.
Or, a tool like plant medicine, maybe to be a mirror for me as well. But I think that what you're talking about with the empathy is to know yourself and say, I know that I tend to take on other people's emotions. And how do I protect my energy? What are those grounding practices that I have? What are those protection practices that I have so that I can separate what is mine versus what is someone else's? Where is empathy serving me and relating to this person? And where am I falling too deep into empathy that I'm becoming attached to their feeling or codependent or enmeshed in their emotion versus that line between us? And so those are deeper questions of sort of the personal development side of self-management.
Right.
And by the way, I just wanted to tell you my Clifton Strengths Finder that I took, my number one is information, which totally makes sense because I just love
data freak.
All things info and data and emotional intelligence and spiritual growth and all of that. And it serves me well, but can't get enough.
Mine was empathy, connectedness. I'm not going to remember. I think it's something about, I don't know. Do you remember anymore?
I just know my second highest one was responsibility. So I have if I say that I'm going to do something for you by a certain time, it like almost kills me if I can't follow through with what I say I'm going to do. And that probably is why radical responsibility is something that I've been able to embrace, even though it's not easy. But I'm always, whenever anything happens, I'm always turning back on myself and saying, how am I contributing to this? How am I co-creating this? What am I not seeing that's adding to this? How am I being complicit in allowing this to happen? And so I think that's a strength of mine. And then I'm able to help bring that out in other people as their coach.
Let's talk a little bit about human design now. So you are a generator.
I'm an emotional generator. 4/6.
Okay. Yes. And talk to me more about the 4/6, please.
Okay. So, and I just came into human design within the last year. So it's been part of this whole transformation.
Last week for me.
And it's like, I've dived so deep into it, but the 4/6, the 4 personality is all about people and relationships and connecting with others and using that to have a life of joy for me. And so my conditioning is that I'm really independent. And I always thought, well, I don't need other people. I've got this figured out. Like that was what I had to do as a kid because both of my parents, as well-meaning, as well-intentioned as they weren't very emotionally present in my life. So I had to be uber independent and resourceful and figure it all out. And that was great for me. You know, that adds to some of my strengths. It's a really good strength to have as an entrepreneur or a parent. But when I look at relationships and joy and satisfaction, being independent and not connecting with others holds me back. So the 4 is really about relationships. And then the 6 for me, and anyone who has a 6 in their profile, you really live life in 3 phases.
Okay.
So like 0 to 30 years is trying things on and messing up and failing and learning and trying a lot of different things. And you're very social and out there, which I was.
Yeah.
And I write a lot about that in my book.
Yes.
And then the next 20 years of your life from about 30 to 50 is integrating all that wisdom, as I'll say, integrating the lessons, embodying it, understanding what it means for you and becoming more yourself. And then the 3rd phase of your life for a 6 is around age 50 and beyond, where you're really the role model. Is the title that human design uses. So you're teaching what you've learned. And that's who I am, and that's how I teach anyways. And I'm excited to step more fully into that as my life keeps
That's so exciting.
evolving.
Yeah, I'm just so fascinated by it. And just starting to scratch the surface. But I mean, I had a mini reading session on the last podcast, and it's just so kind of eye-opening. Not really, though. It's like you're not surprised, but then you're like, wow, this really does make sense.
It's like a confirmation or a validation of who I am, and I get why I'm that way. And I like that, and I don't know it enough to be, I'm definitely not an expert, and I just love it as part of the information Clifton strengths that we talked about. But it's really about becoming who you're meant to be. Okay. Right? And getting rid of all that stuff, all that baggage, all the falseness, all the trauma that we carry, and aligning with decisions that support our authenticity, our soul's purpose. Yeah. And so a lot of that for many of the designs is to follow joy. And especially for me as a generator, I'm literally supposed to follow what brings me joy. Right. But we're told in this world that, who are you to deserve that? Right. And no, you're supposed to, get a job and buy a house and get a career that's safe. And we're told what to do versus what's really aligned for our soul path. Yeah. Just little note of gratitude. Like, so thankful that at my ripe 45 years, it is, just on like the verge of recognizing what I'm meant to do and be. And it feels so wonderful, but just very thankful to have, been awakened to that idea, purpose. And you have been a big part of that, honestly. I just see you so far advanced and like just thinking about things that you've said literally over the years or that have made me take a moment and, kind of go inward. And I've learned a lot from you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. What else? I was going to say, are you aware of your North Node in astrology? I am not. Okay. I wish I was. So something also new to me, but we all have a North and a South node, and my North node is in Virgo. So it's something we're always striving for. We'll never really get there per se. But for me, it's all about organization and systems. And the more I can implement these things into my life, and I'm trying to be a little bit more open about the fact that I'm kind of dealing with my self-diagnosed ADHD. But it all makes sense. Like if I can start organizing and implementing these systems and not, tuning this out and just having more of a flow or organization, I just see magic happening. I don't know. Yeah. But it's interesting to I'm excited for you to take a peek at what yours might be. And then get back to me on that. Yeah, I have my chart. I just don't really know how to read it or what it all means yet. It's I'll let you know. Much, but it's so fun how it all kind of works together. But that was a fun one to look into. Yeah, I think that it's this journey that we're going on, and the more that we can understand ourselves, just the better we're able to show up for other people. And what I am still in the process of learning and sitting in is this idea of quieting the mind space, and my my crown is open in human design. So that means I take in a lot of people's thoughts and I need to recognize what's really mine. Yes. But it also helps me to relate with other people. But I have been trying to move into and just really always preached, for lack of a better word, this really making decisions from heart and intuition. And that for me lately has felt selfish and caused guilt in myself, even though when I really am present and grounded and check in with myself, I feel very clear on my path forward. But it doesn't always make it easy for other people. It can disappoint others. It can even hurt others. And I don't want to be the bearer of hurt on anyone.
Right.
But, from meditation and yoga and all the different therapy and all the energy work and all that, I feel very grounded. And when I'm connected to that space that allows me to make choices that are authentic, it feels good. And so I just kind of want to wrap up that shift of selfishness. So many of us don't want to be selfish, and that's sort of a bad word. And I feel like this is the switch that we're having, and this is even what human design is talking about, the shift that we're having as we're moving into 2027, is that we are moving into a collective where some people might think it's selfish, but when we take care of ourselves, when we do what is right for us, it's going to be what's the best for everyone, for the highest good, for the collective.
Yes.
And that's a shift that we have to make in our life, because even as mothers, we're taught to be the martyr and to give to our children and to take the stale bread that's on the corner of the plate versus the actual meal of sustenance. But all of that denying ourselves is actually making us cranky and not joyful. And then we're putting all that negative energy out into the world. And so,
I like to just liken it to, you're on the airplane, the oxygen mask falls. You've got to serve yourself first in order to be the most helpful and able to help others. And instead of saying selfish, I just say, I'm choosing me. I think that sounds a little better, but I get it. I mean, there are, moments of making big decisions that I've had to make and work through. And I know in my heart that it's a better decision for me, but it's going to take some time for the others to realize. But it's very empowering to be able to listen to yourself and your intuition and trust yourself. And that's also all very new to me.
It's very, very new to me as well. And so the trusting ourselves and recognizing that no one else is, like you said, others might not understand right away. And no one else has lived my life and will not understand where it comes from to be me. And I often use the word self-love and choosing me as well. And I think that a lot of, what I read about in the book and what I help some clients work on as well is this really loving and accepting all parts of ourselves. I talked a little bit about it before, like really loving that part of me that made choices when I was doing drugs in high school, but that is what I think is part of our human evolution, and part of this learning here in this lifetime is to embrace all those parts of ourselves. And then when we do that, we're able to make those choices that serve us.
Sure. Yeah, I think just getting back to human design real quick, part of my chart somewhere in there explains, or is explaining to you off screen, is really just owning all of those pieces and all those parts, the good, bad, and the ugly, and not, according to Maggie, I'm okay with everybody knowing the bits and pieces, but I do feel like I am here to inspire others as well, and to, all that is in the past, and all you can do is choose to try to be better and feel good about it, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch real quick. You were saying shamanic Reiki. Was that what you were talking about earlier?
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that? Or I didn't know do you practice Reiki?
So I practice Reiki on myself. I was trained in Reiki and shamanic Reiki many, many years ago.
Okay.
And, I hear about these things, and if it feels aligned, I go and I study them, just wanting more tools in my toolbox. And I don't necessarily use shamanic Reiki or Reiki on any of my clients. It's really for my own self.
I'm intrigued.
So Reiki is really energy clearing or healing around the 7 chakras. And then shamanic work is more about journeying more into like the subconscious to notice if there are any ties or energy stuck and to help that be removed. And so I also work with a depth hypnotherapist who supports me. And so that is really being brought into hypnosis. And then you're doing shamanic journeying to heal anything that needs healing or addressed. And that could be in this lifetime or past lives.
Oh my God.
And so it's just another tool, I'm just totally open to whatever comes my way. If it feels aligned, I'm going to find out what I can about myself. I would rather, even though it's really hard at times, I would rather know what's going on in me and deal with it and address it than stay stuck in this ignorance and living a life that's not joy and not of my highest purpose.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful. I think, again, it's just having more and more conversations so we can normalize just some of these, like, things. Common thing I keep saying is I'm just learning about this. I'm just learning, and I just think having conversations like this, or even talking about the idea that, plant medicine is just maybe another tool in the tool belt. It doesn't have to be all about drugs or all about EQ, but I think it's gathering what we know, the options, and working with them the best we can.
Yeah, and breaking down the stigma.
Yes.
And honestly, like the fact that I just mentioned the shamanic Reiki, like I don't tell that to hardly anyone. It's something that I keep very quiet because I'm afraid of what people are going to think about it.
Yes.
But as I'm on this journey of really needing to embrace my authenticity, and like it has helped me. So why would I keep that quiet? If that can help someone, heal a part of their past, 100%. So it's scary because I think about, what will people think of me? But I also recognize that life is now too short. Yeah. And I believe I'm meant to inspire others and be the role model as well. And if people can start opening up to ways of evolving, it's just better for us. I mean, the world needs a lot of help right now.
Well, I'm glad I asked, and I'm glad that you shared. Because this is all just wonderful things. I mean, I'm truly, again, so inspired, and you have been doing so much work. And again, your information overload is very,
overloading.
But so proud of you. So your book, what is the best way that people could get that?
So my book is available on Amazon, of course, but if you go to bookforbalance.com, so it's book for FOR balance.com, you can order it that way. And I also have a workbook that goes along with the book so that you can actually do a lot of the coaching prompts that I have. And if your listeners would like to get the free audiobook version of Book for Balance, or of the Balanced Life Blueprint, they can also get the free audiobook version of bookforbalance.com.
I have this all listed in our episode details. And then you do Joy Discovered, is that?
And my website, yes, is joydiscovered.com. Joy Discovered with the ED at the end. Yes.
What else? I'm trying to think. I feel like we've covered so much, and I had so been looking forward to this, and I just really appreciate having you here and you sharing. This is going to be a fun one for so many.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. All right. Well, cheers, girl.
Cheers.
Oh.
Little different than the college days.
Just a little different. Yes.
For more information, please visit mindsonmushrooms.com. Thank you for joining the journey.